Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you won't miss any of my upcoming tales. The morning began with a deceptive kind of brightness, the kind that tricks you into thinking the day will be harmless. The city streets shimmered under a pale winter sun, and I walked into Sophia's house with a practiced smile. Sophia, my sister-in-law, had invited the whole family over for a casual Sunday brunch, though I knew from experience nothing with her was ever casual. Edward, my husband, was already seated at the long oak table, chatting easily with Sophia about something work-related. They stopped when I entered, their voices hitching for a fraction of a second, a pause I caught but pretended not to notice. I took my seat beside Edward, my coat still on because the chill inside wasn't just from the weather, it was from the way both of them looked at me. A waiter-style flourish from Edward and a steaming cup of coffee slid toward me across the table. I reached for it automatically, the rich dark liquid sending up coils of steam, but then something stopped me. A smell faint, metallic, and sharp enough to cut through the roasted aroma. My fingers tightened around the porcelain handle, my pulse ticking in my ears. It was the same scent I remembered from 6 months ago, when I'd sipped tea at this very table and spent the rest of the night doubled over in pain. Back then, Edward had blamed a bad batch of milk, and Sophia had offered sympathy just a little too sweet. I wanted to believe them. I had believed them until now. Because here it was again, that same ghost of a smell, daring me to take a sip. Sophia's eyes lingered on me as she pretended to butter a croissant. Her lips curved in what most people might take as a warm smile, but I saw the glint behind it, the way her gaze kept darting to the cup in my hand. "You look tired, Amelia," she said softly, using my name as if it were an intimate secret. "You should drink. You need the energy." The way she said it, too deliberate, too coaxing, sent a thin ribbon of dread winding down my spine. Edward reached over to touch my hand, his grip firm. "She's right. You've got that big board meeting tomorrow, don't you?" His tone was light, but there was a watchfulness in his face that made my skin crawl. I knew exactly which meeting he meant. The Henderson account was a multi-million-dollar client my firm had been courting for months. I was scheduled to present our proposal, the culmination of weeks of work. If I missed it, Sophia, who worked at a rival agency, would be next in line for the pitch. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't about health. It was about opportunity. I kept my expression neutral, even managing a small smile. "That's right," I said, sliding my phone from my bag. "Speaking of which, I should check on a few details before tomorrow." I stood up, murmuring something about needing a quiet place to make a call. My heels clicked lightly against the marble as I crossed to the study just off the dining room. The moment I was out of sight, I set my phone down on the desk and exhaled slowly. The coffee cup was still warm in my hands. My heart was pounding, but my movements were steady. I scanned the dining room through the narrow gap in the doorway. Sophia had set her own mug down to pour juice for someone. Edward was laughing at something their cousin had said. My chance came when Sophia turned toward the sideboard. I stepped out quietly, switched our cups in one smooth motion, and returned to the study before anyone noticed. From behind the half-closed door, I watched her. She sat back down, wrapped both hands around the mug, and took a generous sip. I felt my stomach twist, not from guilt, but from the weight of knowing that if I was right, I'd just turned their plan on its head. The minutes dragged, each one punctuated by the clink of cutlery and the low murmur of conversation. Then, almost imperceptibly, her posture changed. She set the cup down abruptly. Her hand went to her throat. Edward noticed first. "Sophia? You okay?" She shook her head slightly, blinking rapidly. I don't feel," the words dissolved into a cough that deepened into something harsh and wet. Her face lost its color, her breaths coming shallow and fast. Chairs scraped as family members rushed to her side, voices overlapping in confusion. I stayed where I was, my phone now recording from the desk, every sound and word captured. Edward's voice rose, sharp with panic. "We need to get her to the hospital, now." His hands hovered uselessly as their cousin dialed emergency services. Sophia was slumped sideways, moaning, her eyes glassy. At that moment, I knew I'd been right all along. And if my suspicions were correct, the truth was about to spill out whether they wanted it to or not. I slipped my phone back into my bag, smoothing my dress as if I'd just returned from a perfectly ordinary phone call. The ambulance sirens grew louder in the distance, a strange counterpoint to the clatter of dishes being cleared and the low hum of panic. I stood in the doorway, watching the chaos, my face calm. Inside, though, I was already preparing for the next step. Because this was only the beginning. The paramedics arrived within minutes, the bright flash of their jackets cutting through the muted tones of the dining room. Sophia was pale, almost gray, her breath shallow and ragged. They moved with efficient urgency, slipping an oxygen mask over her face, checking her vitals, asking rapid-fire questions. Edward stayed close to her side, his face tight with worry, but I saw the flicker of calculation beneath the panic. I stood back, watching, my expression composed, though my pulse was a steady drumbeat in my ears. No one noticed that I hadn't touched my coffee. No one asked. I kept my hands folded in front of me, my bag resting lightly against my hip, the phone inside still running the voice recording. Every word mattered now. As they wheeled Sophia toward the door, she reached out weakly, her fingers catching Edward's sleeve. Her voice was muffled under the oxygen mask, but I heard it. "It was yours." Her gaze flickered toward me, a strange mix of anger and realization passing through her eyes. Edward bent down, murmuring something I couldn't catch, his hand pressing against hers before she was loaded into the ambulance. The rest of the family trailed behind in a confused knot, their whispers blending into a chorus of speculation. I volunteered to ride along, claiming concern for her well-being. In truth, I wanted to be there for every word she might let slip. The ride was tense. The siren wailed overhead, and the smell of antiseptic from the medic's kit mingled with the faint bitter scent of coffee still clinging to the cup they'd bagged as evidence. Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness, the paramedic urging her to stay awake. Edward sat rigid beside her, his eyes fixed ahead, jaw clenched. At the hospital, the emergency team swept her into a treatment bay, pulling a curtain closed around them. Edward and I stood outside, the air between us thick and unspoken. He glanced at me once, his eyes hard. "What exactly were you doing in the study for so long?" he asked quietly. I met his gaze without flinching. "Work call," I said smoothly. "You know how it is. Henderson doesn't wait." Something in his expression shifted, but he said nothing more. We waited. 10 minutes felt like an hour before a doctor emerged, his face unreadable. He asked to speak privately with Edward, who followed him down the corridor. I stayed put, leaning against the wall, watching nurses bustle past. When Edward returned, he looked rattled. "They're running toxicology," he said flatly. "Something in her system, something that shouldn't be there." I let my eyebrows lift just enough to look concerned. "That's terrible. How could that happen?" Before he could answer, there was a commotion from behind the curtain. A nurse rushed out, calling for security. I stepped inside, my phone recording again, just in time to hear Sophia's strained voice. "It was supposed to be her," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Edward, tell them it was supposed to be Amelia drinking it. She's got that meeting tomorrow. We were just going to make her sick, just sick enough so she'd miss it." Her voice cracked, her body shaking with the effort. The nurse tried to calm her, but the words were out. Edward's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing without sound. I took a single step closer, my voice low but steady. You wanted me out of the way so you could take the Henderson pitch. And you, I looked at Edward, you helped her. Sophia's eyes burned with resentment. You think you're untouchable. You've taken everything clients, praise he loves you, not me. I just wanted you to fail for once. I didn't look away from her. If failure was what you wanted, Sophia, you've succeeded spectacularly. Just not in the way you planned. Security arrived then, along with a police officer who began taking statements. I handed over my phone, the recording still running. The officer listened, his expression sharpening with every second of Sophia's rambling confession. He glanced at Edward. We'll need to ask you both some questions. They separated us. In the small, sterile interview room, I laid out the pattern of every mysterious illness, every conveniently timed bout of food poisoning, every excuse Edward had offered. I told them about the smell in the coffee, the switch, the recording. When I finished, the officer nodded grimly. If the toxicology matches what you're saying, we'll have more than enough. By the time I left the hospital, the sky was darkening, the city lights flickering to life. Edward was still inside, Sophia under guard. I hailed a taxi, sinking into the back seat as exhaustion hit me all at once. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the release of holding myself so still, so calm, for so long. The next morning, the police called. The toxicology confirmed it, high levels of a dangerous chemical compound, one used in clinical trials but illegal for personal use. It could have caused severe illness, possibly worse. They'd found traces in Sophia's kitchen, and when they searched Edward's office, they uncovered bottles of the substance, along with a notebook detailing dosages and my reactions from past incidents. It was over, or so it seemed. But the truth was, this was just the middle of the story. The real ending would take months, and it would be written in a courtroom. And I intended to be there for every word. The trial was set for early spring, but the months leading up to it stretched on like an endless winter. Every day felt like a delicate balance between my professional life, now more visible than ever, and the simmering storm of the criminal case. The media got wind of the story after the charges were filed, prominent marketing executives' husband and sister-in-law charged in poisoning plot. My name was kept out of the headlines at my request, but the whispers at networking events and client dinners told me the story was very much alive in my industry. Edward and Sophia were charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. They both pleaded not guilty at first, but as the prosecution laid out the evidence, Sophia's recorded confession, the toxicology report, the lab analysis of the coffee cup, and the pages from Edward's notebook, their composure began to crack. The court sessions were like watching a theater performance where the actors didn't know the audience could see through them. Sophia arrived each day with her hair perfectly done and her expression set in a mask of innocence, but her eyes betrayed her. Edward, on the other hand, had lost weight, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. He kept glancing at me during testimony, as if searching for some sign of mercy. There was none to give. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand with my head high. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's keys. I spoke clearly, describing each incident in detail: the first time I'd fallen ill, the explanations Edward had given, the growing pattern I'd tried to ignore. I told them about the coffee at Sophia's brunch, the smell, the switch, and how I'd watched her take the sip meant for me. I handed over the original audio recording, and the courtroom listened to Sophia's voice tremble as she admitted the plan. Her lawyer tried to paint it as a moment of hysteria, claiming she hadn't meant it literally. But the prosecution countered with the physical evidence, the notebook, the chemical traces. Piece by piece, the picture became undeniable. In a particularly tense moment, the prosecutor asked Sophia directly why she'd done it. Her voice broke as she said, "Because she wins everything. I work twice as hard and get half the recognition." Edward and I thought, if she missed the Henderson meeting, she'd take a hit. Just one hit. It was a strange thing to hear petty jealousy laid bare under oath. But it also solidified the truth for the jury: this wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. The verdict came after only 2 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Sophia wept openly, her tears smudging the careful lines of her makeup. Edward sat motionless, his hands clenched into fists on the defense table. The judge sentenced them both to lengthy prison terms, 15 years for Sophia, 18 for Edward, given his role in obtaining and supplying the chemical. I walked out of the courthouse into the crisp afternoon air feeling lighter than I had in years. It wasn't joy exactly, it was relief, the kind that comes from knowing a shadow that's been following you is finally gone. The Henderson meeting, the one they'd tried so hard to keep me from attending, had gone ahead months earlier. Not only had I been there, but I'd secured the account. It became one of the most successful campaigns my firm had ever handled, and my career had flourished in the aftermath. I'd been promoted to senior partner, and invitations to speak at industry conferences poured in. 1 year to the day after the verdict, I stood on the stage at a global marketing summit in London. The ballroom was filled with executives, creatives, and entrepreneurs from all over the world. As I delivered my keynote on resilience and professional integrity, I could feel the eyes of the audience locked on me, hanging on every word. I didn't tell them the whole story, they didn't need the sordid details. But I told them the lesson: trust your instincts, protect your work, and never underestimate the quiet power of persistence. People may try to take from you what you've earned. The best revenge isn't anger, it's living, succeeding, and refusing to let them write your ending. When I stepped down from the stage, the applause followed me like a warm tide. I smiled, knowing that somewhere, in 2 different prison cells, Edward and Sophia might hear of my success. And that was enough. I had my life back. I had my career. And I had the unshakable knowledge that I'd faced their worst and come out stronger. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment, it's about proving to yourself that you can survive what was meant to destroy you. Moral lesson. Life has a way of testing our strength when we least expect it. The people we trust most can sometimes be the very ones who seek to undermine us, but their betrayal does not define our worth. What matters is how we respond, whether we allow their actions to diminish us, or whether we choose to rise above them. Resilience is not just about enduring, it's about moving forward with grace and purpose. True power lies not in seeking vengeance through harm, but in living so well that those who sought to break you are forced to watch you succeed. Every challenge can be turned into a stepping stone, every setback into a stage for your comeback. Protect your dreams fiercely, trust the small voice that warns you when something isn't right, and never give anyone the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. Success is the loudest, most unshakable answer you can give to betrayal. And sometimes, the sweetest victory is simply thriving in full view of those who wished you wouldn't. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and leave a comment with the lesson you're taking away today.